Welcome to the Church of Mabus radio show. It's Friday night, 7:10 p.m. Central, and you're listening to United Public Radio, 107.7 FM, New Orleans. We got Jay McNicholas here with us tonight, and our guest is Dr. Dennis Carroll, Hunting the Shadows podcast on YouTube. If you want to check it out, that's Hunting the Shadows podcast. And it's great to have you here, Dennis. I'm originally from Georgia and Florida, and where'd you say, South Carolina or North Carolina?
Yeah, I'm kind of situated a little bit closer to the Appalachians there, a little bit close to them. But, I was talking to somebody the other day about that. That's kind of one of the strangest areas on the planet, the Appalachian Mountains. You got a lot of weird stuff going on in there. And so I'm kind of not too far away from that. So I get kind of a feedback on that a little bit.
So what got you originally started with all the weirdness? What was the catalyst?
I'm sorry, I lost you there for just a second. What did you say?
Oh, I was just saying, what got you started with all this? What was your the catalyst that got you involved with paranormal? What happened?
Yeah. I just recently started my own podcasting thing on that, and which is called Hunting the Shadows. It's on YouTube channel, and I really enjoy that. I wish I was telling somebody the other day, and I've been in the paranormal field now for about 55 plus years, and to me it is always an ongoing learning experience. Somebody asked me the other day, "When are you ever going to retire?" I said, "I don't see that happening. It's too interesting. Yeah, you won't turn me loose in that respect." But I go way back, and I was thinking the other day, I wish we'd have had stuff like this 40 some odd years ago, and when all this was going on in the beginning and stuff like that. But we didn't have the internet. You've got the libraries of the world at your fingertips now. We didn't have the internet. We didn't have all that. So I'm old school, but old school is cool. Okay, that's what I always say. And also, it's kind of like that old country song. I was paranormal before paranormal was cool. And so I go way back on that stuff. But actually, I think about at the age of about 12 is when I had one of my very first paranormal experiences. Actually, I saw demonic spirits, and didn't really at the time realize what I was seeing. And it was during a church service, and the pastor told everybody they was praying for this person up front, and the pastor told everybody, kind of close your eyes and pray and all that. Well, I didn't. I kept watching, and I saw these things come out of this man and go through the wall next to him. And the only way I can describe them, and I've seen them manifest a lot of times since then, but the way they did that day, the way I can describe them is they look like large, dirty, white, soccer ball sized lights. Dirty, I call it white, kind of dirty light like. I mean, it was not a bright light. You know what I'm saying? It was dark light. And it was really what I was seeing. I didn't understand at the time. Was actual spiritual energy light. That's basically what these things are made up of. But I didn't understand that at the time. But it was a jaw dropping moment for me. I'm going, I cannot believe what I'm seeing. And I think I cannot remember a time. And I told this to somebody not long ago. I can't remember a time when I was not interested in the paranormal. I mean, I've always been, interested in ghost stories and stuff like that when I was a kid. But to actually experience it, that's a whole different ball game. That it really is true about seeing is believing, and really, it really comes home when you see something or experience something like that. And I think at about that age, I think I was about 12 years old, something like that. It kind of lit a fire under me to understand what it was I saw. and kind of grasp it, in an intellectual kind of way and try to understand what he was. But that's where my journey began, sort of, to try to learn this unseen world that's around us. As a matter of fact, I wrote a book called The Road Unseen, a paranormal journey into high strangeness. And this world to me is just as real as the world that you see around you, that the five senses pick up on. Uh, it is there, and we can't ignore it. You know, a lot of people want to ignore it. And back, like like I was saying, back in the older days, they were ready to kind of put you on the funny farm if you talked about stuff like this. Uh, you were a crackpot. That's the way they labeled you. They laughed at you. To this day, there is a stigma attached to it, but not as bad today as it is then. It's more open today. That's why we're having this show today. I mean, it's a lot more open. People are talking and discussing it more. And somebody asked me the other day, said, "Do you think that may be fostering an uplift in more paranormal activity because it is so open and discussed now?" I said, "Sure, that's probably got a lot to do with a lot of more activity that's going on because it's more noticeable." I said this to someone not long ago. You kind of poke the paranormal, it's going to poke you back.
Mm-hmm.
And the more you look into it, the more it kind of looks back at you in that way. And I've had people come up and say, "Well, you've had a lot of experiences, Dennis, over the years, and I never had anything happen to me." You know, nothing ever happens to me like that. And I've had a lot of different experiences, but I was out in the field. You don't, usually you're more of a target when you're out in the field, doing the research and investigation and all that stuff. And when it came to all this stuff, guys, I'll say this: I want the whole pie. I don't want just one little slice of it. That's why I went into cryptozoology, UFOlogy, spiritual. I call it spiritual research. I don't call it ghost hunting. That's been done to death. I call it spiritual research because you do run into different types of spirits out there. Okay. And I love folklore. I like everything connected with it. I think it is all in many ways connected. The more you look at it, the more you understand that. And it is a big subject with many different fields. But like I say, they all eventually these fields overlap each other sometimes. I mean, you may have, I've seen Bigfoot. I know he exists. I know he's real. I've
Mm-hmm.
actually experienced that. I have seen UFOs. I had a very dramatic UFO encounter that actually affected me. So, like, you remember the movie The Mothman Prophecies? I
Mm-hmm.
kind of lived through that for a while after I had a UFO sighting. So, a lot of these things happened over the years. A lot of different things. I've seen full bodied apparitions. I even ran into a vampire one time, a real supposed vampire. Vampires are real. They're just not like what you see in Hollywood, kind of thing. There's a difference in the folklore, the vampire folklore, and I think the real true vampires that exist in this world. In that respect, you've got human vampires, and you've got supernatural type things. I'm not going to get into that now, but anyway, that that's just one segment of all this, and this stuff is so engrossing, so multi-leveled that it can be amazing, when you go into it. And a lot of people don't understand that that's what the true paranormal field is all about. It's got all these different divisions and all these different sections of it. But yet, I think without a doubt, they do connect.
So when it comes to some of the demonic stuff and spiritual warfare, how do you handle those cases? Is it from from Christianity or your own belief system? What do you use to deal with some of that stuff?
Uh-huh. Well, I have had actual a lot. I don't really call myself a demonologist, okay, because a true demonologist is sanctioned by the Catholic Church, okay, in that respect. I kind of call myself a demonology consultant because I have a lot of cases. People come to me for advice on it. I have done a lot of demonology cases. I go into where people have had what I call demonic infestations of houses or families where they have these situations. And I'm not an exorcist. I don't do actual exorcisms per se because I'm going to tell you about that. That's not what Hollywood you see in the movies is all about. A real true exorcism, and I have participated in exorcisms. But a true exorcism takes a team of people. It's not just one or two people. It's not just one priest doing it. It takes a team of people to do this correctly in the correct way. And another thing about an exorcism is it's a very, very spiritual thing. And you have to be very careful how you're dealing with that. I've seen them go wrong sometimes. They go off track, and you don't want that to happen either because you are dealing with people's lives and well being here, you know. And that is why I think a lot of priests, ministers, and all that, I'm a minister myself, a lot of ministers don't want to mess with that because you don't really know what you're dealing with. Is it mental? Is it drug use? Is it something else altogether? It could be. You have to be a doctor. You have to be a psychiatrist. You have to be a lot of things to understand what's going on with that. That's why I say it takes a team effort, you know. And a lot of these ministers, and I can understand why, do not want to really mess with that because you open yourself up to some bad stuff. If it's not really a true spiritual thing going on, you could still badly affect someone. So you have to be very, very, very careful how you handle these things. Now, what I do mostly, 90% of the time, I do cleansings, area cleansings, or some people like to call them location exorcisms. Well, whatever name you want to call them. Most of the time, that takes care of the problem. You have negative energies in a place affecting people, and I've seen it do that, very badly affect people. But here's the thing about it, guys: when it gets physical, people start getting attacked or scratched. You know, when it goes beyond just emotional and all that stuff, and when it gets into the physical, that's kind of ramps it up a little bit. You know what I'm saying? That's when you got to really, understand what you're doing and how to address it. But when I started out many years ago with this, and I had a lot of these cases come up, uh, it wasn't just about investigation, okay? And I won't say this, and I'm not trying to be, smart aleck about it, but there's a lot of groups out there that they just want to investigate, have a fun time, and leave. That's it, And you can do that with historical places and stuff, locations like that. But when you deal with families, people who really need your help, with a situation, that's not time for a social club thing. You know what I'm saying? That's when it gets real serious because people came to me wanting help, and I said, well, I want to be able to offer that help. Somebody wants, ask you for help, you want to give them that help if you can, or find somebody that will help them, whatever the situation is. Um, and that's what I went for. It's not about just the investigation and the research. It's about helping people. And that's a big part of especially the demonology consultants thing, and I have consulted with people from all over the world with these problems. I've had cases in India. I've had cases in Britain. I've had them all over the world, definitely. And this is an ongoing thing that goes past cultures, nationalities, racial lines. It's all over the world kind of thing. This is a spiritual thing and spiritual warfare. When you have to engage in spiritual warfare, you better know what your foundation is for it, what your knowledge base is, how to address it. Because if you don't, you're not going to help anybody, and you certainly can end up badly affecting yourself too if you're not careful. I have had many cases. Well, a lot of these so-called paranormal teams go into these areas, go into these situations. They take this stuff home with them. These things follow them back.
Oh,
And
yeah.
yeah, I give them problems. And that's another thing I said. I do not like the idea of children participating in these investigations either, because I never allowed that. When I had groups and I
Well, what
mentored a
if
lot
it,
of groups over the years, I
what
never
if the
allowed
child is
kids to
starting?
do that.
What
Well,
if the
I
child is
tell you
part of
what.
the infestation, though? If the child is the attention of the infestation or the possession, how do you work that in that case?
Yeah. Well, to me, children are sort of more open, more so than we are. I think the older
Yeah, I think
you
so.
are, the more of a veneer you kind of have, the more of a bumper you have against these things. Whereas children and animals don't really have developed that yet, you might say.
Yeah,
They're more open, and that's why these things go after children and animals. They're open game for them
they're
in that
easier
respect.
targets.
Yeah.
We have a
Well,
gentleman in the chat room that was wondering if you could kind of clarify your statement that we do not know anything about the paranormal as we thought we did. Do you feel that it's more of a spiritual thing? Is it more of a dimensional thing, celestial, alien? What is it that we don't think we know?
well, like I said earlier, it's an ongoing, always a learning thing. Okay. The more you do it, the more you learn. The more, we learn a lot by looking at the patterns of things. And that's why I tell people a lot, especially in paranormal research and investigation, you look for those patterns. Those patterns teach you, give you clues and all that. We learn by association of things. If this did that and if this. So we're always, the minute, I've said this before, when you quit learning, they're ready to shovel dirt in your face, okay? Because learning is living. It
Yeah.
is. It's living. That's part of living. That's what it is. And that is true about any field, whether it be the paranormal or whatever. That I'm also an ex law officer, and that's an ongoing learning experience. When you're a Leo, you got to keep on top of the game. You got to learn. You got to qualify with your firearms. You got to keep going. You got to learn law too. You got to understand the laws that are going.
Hmm.
So if you don't go in with an open mind on these things, you're really defeating yourself to begin with, you know?
Um,
And I was just going to say, Dennis, does it seem like they're heating up a lot lately? Because if it's not the end of the world lately, it seems like it's missing the opportunity. So are things
yeah.
heating up a lot with a lot of this stuff, like more severe?
Yeah, well, I think people, and I've noticed this before, Jeff, a lot of people have mentioned it to me. Everybody's got this weird feeling that, something's coming down the line. A lot of people are feeling that something's going to happen, kind of thing. I picked up on that my own self in that respect. And like I said earlier about this being an open subject now, more so than it used to be. I think we have gone into a period of heightened spiritual awareness to a certain degree. Okay, and I think when you do that, you kind of open the environment up to some of this stuff, and we become more attuned to it. And I think we're picking up on some of that. You know what I'm saying? And you've got things like, you've got CERN, and you've got the study on quantum physics and portals and all this stuff going on with that as well. And I'll talk about that in my book, The Road Unseen, a little bit. You've got quantum physics that figures into this, parallel universes, and all this other stuff that we need to look at. You've got timeline stuff going on. You've got the Mandela effect and all this other stuff. All this ties in. You got some really weird stuff going on, more so now. And like I said, we're more aware of it. And I think that's opening us up to it in some aspects. Although I think there's some other things going on in the background. I can say this without a doubt, okay, and I'm not going to get into conspiracy theories tonight, but there is a force in this world of darkness, and it works in the shadows. That's why I call my podcast one of Hunting the Shadows. It works in the shadows, it works in the darkness, and it is working against us. Okay, not only as a race of beings, but in a spiritual warfare sense way too. And it is working constantly against us. and it has instigated itself, I think, into every aspect of our existence, whether we like it or not. I think it's there, and we will ignore it to our own discontent and to our own malcontent if we're not careful. And I think it's out there, and I think it's very real. I know, as a demonology consultant, I've run into this, and I know I have seen demons. Okay, just as much as I'm looking at you right now, I've seen them face to face. I know they exist. I know what they can do. They are whatever name you want to call them. They are evil, negative entities. That's what they are, and they are out for bad things. They're not good actors. Okay, and they really hate us in that respect because I think for one thing they can never be what we are, human. Okay, they can't be that. As they sort of have not only a rivalry going on thing here, but a pure hatred because we are what they can never be. And we experience things that I think that they can't experience. That's why you run into demonic possession. They won't take over a body and experience things through you, whatever. And I tell people the four basic ways that these entities will attack you are spiritually, physically, mentally, and emotionally. Those are the four main avenues they will take against you. And I tell people, that's what I talk to people when I consult with them. Watch those four areas very closely in your life. Do not open doors in your life to these things because these entities are opportunists. Don't give them the opportunity because if you do, they'll take it. I've seen them do it many, many times. So we have to be very careful how we deal. And as a matter of fact, I was talking to somebody the other day. I've actually had cases of demonic influence coming through video games. They can do this in any way to get to us by using those four avenues I mentioned earlier. That's what you got to really watch out for.
Definitely. And, I know some people say there's not these evil beings or not a devil. And, there's different categories for it. But I've said that if you were sitting in a chair and you woke up and Jeffrey Dahmer was standing over you, you would probably change your mind right quick about any of that real fast. And I know I've seen some stuff in some of the ghost hunting stuff, and I don't really watch many of those shows, but a few of them and some of the Native American S-Walker, I try not to say the skin word. But I know there's like this weird lore that if you do evil as a human, somehow that you can maybe like become these kind of entities or something, like with the S-Walker thing. I've seen one of those shows talk about somebody being a serial killer, evil spirit, and somehow that's like you get like a promotion in Satan's army. I know there's weird stuff by Russ Dysdar about satanic like super soldiers and weird stuff. So there's weird stuff, definitely. And if you could just look at the news by accident and see horrible things that make no sense.
I'm not going to play devil's advocate, okay? But let me say this: we have a capacity for evil. Mankind has a built-in capacity. Definitely, look at what we do to each other on a regular basis. But there is another darkness back there in the shadows. As a law officer, I have seen that. I mean, firsthand. I've looked into the eyes of human beings, and I've seen evil. I mean, pure evil looking back. And it wasn't human. It was like looking in the eye of a shark or something. You know what I'm saying? There was no emotion there. I know of one case we had where this guy killed his girlfriend for lunch, cut her up in pieces, went home and took a nap. I mean, how unhuman can you be in that respect? Well, how unemotional can you detach yourself from something like that? And I think this other evil that's there is sort of an instigator for some of this. I think some people open themselves up more to this than other people by their lifestyle, by drug use, by alcohol abuse, whatever the situation, or maybe they have been abused by someone in their past. Somehow or another, they can be opened up to these forces sometimes, not every time. You can't paint this with a broad brush. But I mean, there are cases when this happens. Look at Charles Manson and people like that. have gone so far over into this. I think that evil is like it's sitting there, this inherent evil, and waiting for that opportunity to push its power out or to do what it wants to do, to push you over the edge where it wants you to go. I think it's waiting there. But like I said, we have enough evil inherent in ourselves without that. But I think it's still there, and I think it's not every time, but it is prevalent in a lot of these cases. And I've seen this happen, especially when you get into cults and stuff like that, and all this other weird stuff. It plays a thing. It does a job on your mind. And what did I say earlier about those four areas? The mental, physical, emotional. You got to watch those because that's where these things work. And a lot of times they will use things like addiction. Like you can be addicted to pornography or gambling or whatever the situation, not just alcohol and drugs. You can be addicted to other things. You can be addicted to power. You can be addicted to money, sex, whatever the situation. They use that as your weakness against you in that respect to take over what they want to do. And they are definitely, there is that force in the world, whatever name you want to call it, the devil, whatever title you want to give it. And it's known by different titles and different cultures and situations but it is there. I think it goes beyond regular human evil.
Yeah, and then, like you said, there's some people that actually invite that kind of stuff. People that may not necessarily have done the correct research, and they come across a certain book of spells, or maybe even the Ouija board. Sometimes people have open up a Ouija board, a Hasbro toy thing, really. And then they get playing with it, and they ask the wrong things, or they do the wrong incantations, and then an entity, infests their house, haunts the house, or even possesses the person. So there's many avenues to get these things to turn you into a non-human.
Uh-huh. Well, I mentioned portals earlier. There are spiritual doorways too that can be opened spiritually, I think, without a doubt. I've been in areas where that has happened, and it does open those areas up to different types of activity. You can do that. You can do that. And some people that play around with these things, like Ouija boards, And let's look at a Ouija board for a minute. And I've had a lot of Ouija board cases, okay? I mean, a lot of them. Let's look. It's not the board, okay? That's a piece of cardboard with a piece of plastic planchette on, that's what that is. But it's the purpose and intent behind it. That's the main thing. I can make a Ouija board with a piece of paper and a bottle cap. Okay, no big deal. That's not it. It's the human intention, and people don't realize a lot of times what they're opening themselves up to when you open these spiritual doorways. What do you think you're talking to over there on that other side? What do you think you're dealing with? You don't really know. I mean, it's like walking through a dark room with absolutely no light. You don't know when you're going to bounce off the walls. Now, that happened too. You don't know when you're going to run into something you can't see. And that's what you're dealing with this unseen world, okay, that I mentioned earlier at our beginning of our conversation. It is just as real as the world you can see around you. And it can be just as persuasive and powerful to your existence in that respect. And people need to realize what they're dealing with here and what forces they can be tapping into if they're not careful, and how it can affect them. I had one case, I'll tell you one right quick. It was kind of funny. I had this young lady call me, and she said, Mr. Carroll, we had a little Ouija board session over the weekend, and I brought the board back home, and some weird things have been happening ever since then. Doors are opening, lights, and all this weird, regular, regular paranormal activity stuff going on. And she said, "I'm really scared now." Okay. And I said, "Well, I told her how you really truly dispose of the." She wanted to get rid of it, And I said, "Well, I'll tell you how you're supposed to dispose of a Ouija board. I told her what to do, and the main thing is you don't break them, you don't burn them, you bury them. That's the one way to mainly get rid of it, supposedly. So I told her that. I said, you just bury this thing. Don't ever go back there again and forget about it, you know. You pray over it, put some salt on it or whatever you need to do to close this out. And so a few days later, you know, she called me back and she said, Miss Carroll, I did everything you told me to do. You know, I went and I buried it, I salted it, said the Lord's Prayer over it. I left and I never went back there. But what do you do if the Ouija board comes back? I said, what? What are you talking about? She said, well, I was laying on my front porch this morning. And I said, well, I've never had that happen before. That's interesting. She said, well, I think some of my friends, I told them what I was doing. I think they went and dug it up and did that, you know, for a joke and put it back on my porch. I said, well, here's what you do. Go back and rebury that thing and don't tell your friends where you put it and get yourself some new friends. I think it might be all right with that. But that was one of the strangest Ouija board incidences I had happen. That was kind of funny, though.
Yeah, definitely. I've heard different things with them too. And it's weird how they just pump them out with like toy companies, you know, and anyone can get them, a kid or whatever. You know, I forget the toy company names, but they're out there and it's just crazy. That's for sure. Then I've seen the ones online on Facebook where like the giant ones, like someone made a giant one. It's like, are you just trying to start revelations or whatever? What are you trying to do with these things? They're definitely doorways. And I know one thing I want to definitely get into your knowledge about that I've had an interest in. Me and Christina, my fiance, saw a strange wolf-like creature on the side of the road that we might have thought was a dog man or an S-walker. It's very weird looking. It almost reminded me of like an illustration in a Native American book of like a native wearing a fur of a wolf. But it was very weird. And then later someone said that they were actually coyote wolf hybrids they let loose around here, but it didn't look anything like that. This was a lot weirder. I'm still trying to figure out why the hell they're doing coyote wolf hybrids and letting them loose here. That just sounds crazy, but that's true too. I don't know why the hell they're doing that, but I'm kind of curious in that subject a lot. What's come up with that in your cases or studies with Dogman?
Well, yeah, there's a lot of talk about skinwalkers, and I've done a lot of study on that. Matter of fact, a lot of the Native Americans don't really like to talk about skinwalkers too much because they're considered, well, they are basically a skinwalker is a witch or a warlock or sorcerer, whatever name you want to call it, and they do a transmutation of themselves. They are shapeshifters per se in that respect. And by the way, shapeshifting is a big supernatural power to have. Okay, shapeshifting. The demonic can shapeshift. Angels are supposed to shapeshift. Matter of fact, I'm going to be doing a 2-hour seminar next week, next Wednesday night, on all about angels. Angels are a fascinating subject, by the way, as other spiritual beings. Sort of on the good side, the flip side of it.
Yeah.
But that is a premier power to be able to shapeshift. Okay. And mankind has always been enthralled by that as well. So that's where you get the skinwalker thing that comes in. Also, the European werewolf shares that sort of similarity, although they're coming from two completely different avenues, you might say. You can't really compare the werewolf and the skinwalker in that respect, except they are shapeshifters. That's the only really true connection they have, because they're shamanic, the way they go about doing this. I won't get deep into that tonight, but they have a ceremony where they have to let blood and all this. They use drugs and all this supposedly to shapeshift and all that. Same thing with the European werewolf in that respect. They use the same kind of a ceremony in that way. Although, like I say, you're dealing with two completely different subjects here, folklore wise. But it all comes down to dark magic. Dark evil magic, whatever term you're going to give it in that respect. This dark sort of goes into what I would say sorcery, definitely. And getting this ability to shapeshift, you know, even in satanic worship and satanic cults and dark witchcraft, you obtain a certain level of power, and you usually do this by murder, by the way. You have to kill certain members of your family in order to obtain these different levels. In order to do that, the more level, the higher the level, the more power you supposedly get from this demonic power and all this stuff. You are able to do these things. It's been said that for hundreds of years that witches can turn into black cats when they want to, or turn into black panthers. That's a well-known thing I mentioned earlier about the Appalachian Mountains. You've got a lot of folk magic in the Appalachian Mountains, and one of them is that witches can turn into black panthers that roam the woods. That's one aspect of that is shapeshifting. When you change your shape from one shape to another, or transmutation, whatever name you want to give it, that is a very powerful dark magic in that respect. Um, a very spiritual magic, because what you're doing is changing your very existence and being from one thing to another. Now, you even have this going back through history. I mean, you have this in connection with the lion men and the leopard men in Africa. You have the jaguar men in South America. You have the berserkers and the Vikings. Some of the berserkers weren't just bears; they were werewolves like. They became wolves. This was precipitated with ceremonies and drugs that, in their mind, they became these animals, just like the lion men did or the jaguar men did. You're doing a sort of shapeshift from man into animal, but you're leaving a hybrid kind of a thing going on here. And that is like the werewolf or the were tiger in Japan or China or India.
Yeah, the
You
rare
have
shots
were
though.
leopards. You have this ability to do this. You even have polar bears in the Eskimos. You have were polar bears. So this goes through many different cultures worldwide. This ability supposedly to shapeshift. So it's not just the skinwalker, although they're pretty well known. It's not just that, but this occurs and shows up in many different cultures worldwide.
And I've had light being experiences where there was a time here at Silver Lake, Florida. I was listening to Watchword Bible on my TV, like a DVD Bible thing, and something told me to go outside and look over the house. And basically, I went outside, turned towards the house, and saw two beings of light as if they'd been in the house go through the roof and fly into the heavens, completely sober. And there's been times I've not been sober and seen stuff, but that time definitely completely sober. Only thing I do mess with now is weed, and that's because I have a lot of arthritis and I'm a cancer survivor. And but that time, nothing, not booze, not nicotine, nothing. It was just like two people made of light, like an angel. And I guess maybe it was my dad, because I think there may be something to light bodies when you die and stuff like that. Maybe we are those. I'm still trying to figure it out. I've heard they're ETs, I've heard they're angels, but no mistaking it. I'll never forget it. It was just two people made of light, and they flew right out of my house into the sky. And I know you
Uh-huh.
said that you're going to be doing a presentation on that. And I know you don't want to do the whole presentation right now, but do you have a few main points that maybe you could share about light beings and angels?
That sounds like a definite angelic sighting. Definitely. These things are beings of spiritual energy and light. They are. That's what they basically are. They're not humans like we are. Okay. Although they can appear to look like us when the
They take our shape,
need
yeah.
arises. There you go. There's that sort of shape shifting thing again. Like I said, spiritual, supernatural beings can do that. That's the power that they have, that we don't have, but we can tap into it in dark ways. Okay. But anyway, yeah, definitely when it comes to the angel, I'm going to tell you something about the angel. It's a fascinating subject. Matter of fact, I told somebody this the other day. I've seen demons. I know they exist. I want to see some angels. Okay. And most of the time, though, and you were given a gift in order to see that, that's sort of a spiritual gift that you're given. And at that time of your life, Jeffrey, at that moment in time of your life. Maybe that's something you needed. You know what I'm saying? Sort of to reassure you and to let you know that, there is a goodness out there. There is a light at the end of our tunnel. You know what I'm saying? Kind of thing. And I think we are given these gifts. I've run into this a lot of times. I think we're sometimes given these gifts of assurance by our Creator in that respect, just to let us know that, hey, He's still got a handle on things. Kind of, there's still some good in the world. Definitely. And here's what I tell people a lot. And I'm going to tell you what, angels, I'm going to tell you this. Angels have even appeared as dogs. Okay? They can do whatever they need to do because they are the servants of the Creator. That's their main job. And that's why I tell people it is a big no-no to pray to angels. You don't pray to angels. You don't put them between you and your Creator. You don't worship the creation. You worship the Creator. You know what I'm saying? And people have a mistake with that sometimes. They don't understand that. But spiritually, that's where you don't want to go wrong with that. But it is basically said that we all supposedly have guardian angels.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's what you saw that night, that day. That's what you were allowed to see that. There is a passage in the Bible. I think it happened with the prophet Elijah and the prophet Elias. Elias was going to take over for Elijah, and they had a big battle with the Philistines, at that day. And Elijah told Elias, God's going to help us out. He's going to send us help because it was overwhelming odds against the Israelites. Okay. And Elias said, well, I just can't see that happening. We're going to get massacred out here today. And Elijah said, Lord, God, please open his eyes and let him see the spiritual aspects of this. And all of a sudden, Elias said, where did all these big men come from? The host with us is greater than what is against us. He was able to see that spiritual side for just a few moments. If we could have those spiritual eyes, what things would we see? Would might be a very amazing things. Definitely.
Definitely. I mean, we only see what we can see with our senses. There's, a lot more. Even with the sun, like that's the weirdest thing. That's why I don't understand how people don't believe in like a great spirit, or they say they don't believe in God or whatever, and that's fine. But what about the great spirit? What about the nature energies? Do you think they're just dumb? Like they don't have any intelligence to them or anything? Just look at the sun. That's the weirdest thing ever. Yeah. And even like Jehovah's Witnesses and stuff on their little, not that I'm a Jehovah's Witness, but on their little magazine, they have the sun and a dude sitting in it, like I guess the Lord. So, I mean, all these ancient cultures think weird stuff about the sun, from Egyptian to whatever. And I think there's some kind of connection between the sun and these beings of light. Like maybe that's like a source of God, or it's definitely weird. There's books about the sun, spiritual books that get into a lot of weird stuff. But so what is it? Have you had light being cases? Like where people see light beings? Is that something anybody's come to you about?
Yeah. Well, there is that connection of the Creator with light, and what is, goodness is light and darkness is the absence of light. That's basically what you look at. I tell people when you open your door at night in a lighted house, darkness does not fall in the house. Light falls out because light is a substance. It is something. Whereas in darkness is the absence of light. It's nothing in that respect, if you want to look at it that way. But I think that there is a basic spiritual thing with this light, like we said earlier about these being beings of light, spiritual energy. And what I saw that day when I was a kid was sort of the flip side, the dark side of that energy kind of a thing. I think you've got negative and positive things going on here. Okay. Definitely. That is a law of the universe. You've got negativity, you've got positivity stuff. I think what you're looking at in the basic terms is that, although we call it good and evil or light and darkness, whatever names we want to give it, I think it is a property that is what is made of the universe around us. That's a big part of it, I think, definitely. But spiritually speaking, to to me, I like the idea of the light and the good things and all that, as opposed to what's going on in the world around us today. There's so much hatred, so much division in the world. You can see without a doubt that the darkness or the dark forces, whatever name you want to give them, are hard at work trying against us to pull us apart, to instigate themselves between us and the light, you might say, the good things of this universe and this life. We have to really watch out for that, and that's why I warn people not to play with something. It's like playing with a rattlesnake, okay? If I give you a live rattlesnake and you play around with it, sooner or later, what's going to happen? You're going to get bit. You're going to get, but you can't blame the snake. That's his nature. Snake's going to be a snake, okay? We can blame you, though. You're the one playing with the snake. That's your responsibility. And, that's what's going on in the world today a lot, and we see this. Nobody wants to take responsibility for their actions anymore. Okay, they want to have an excuse for something. Oh, I killed 10 people because I didn't get a pony when I was a little kid. Okay, kind of thing. They want an excuse for everything they do, and they don't want the responsibility of it. But I think we need to own up to our responsibilities, especially when dealing with these certain kind of forces in the world around us, because they are definitely out to do one thing and one thing only: to absolutely, completely destroy us in the end. Evil in itself is self-destructive. Okay, and whatever it deals with, it will eventually destroy everything around it if you let it. That's just the way it is. Whereas on the other hand, goodness and light is creative. It creates and brings forth life. So you got, those opposites again.
Yin and yang.
It's philosophical.
Yeah, no, it really is.
I guess,
really is.
yeah.
And
so, one of our
Jay.
chat room guys, John, has a question about the descriptions of angels in the Bible. Because as far as I know, there's like 3 or 4 different, like, I guess, subspecies, and they're different names for them that I don't necessarily know are in the Bible. But as far as I understand, that there's a group of angels called the Solarim. There's a group called the Rephaim, the Elohim, and there's several others.
Seraphim.
Seraphim. Yeah. So what's the differences in the way the
Bible
describes it? There's a tier of them, so there are different levels. So, like, I guess, like lieutenants and whatnot. Can you talk about
some
that?
Some of them are very strange looking. They're very alien looking, if you want to look at that way. And that's why I said that in my book. They're sort of the first aliens. In other words, the fallen angels that fell here to Earth. We've already been invaded by aliens. Okay, that's what they are. They're not beings of this planet. They don't really belong here. So really, they're aliens, if you want to put it that way. Okay, and that's what they are. And that influence is still with us today. The fallen angels, the rebel angels, whatever. Now the angels that you're talking about, they're different classes of them,
right?
And they have different jobs. They have different things. The first name for the actual first name of the angels, they were called the Watchers.
Yes.
The Watchers, because they are sort of the supervisors of the universe. That was their job, to watch everything, to make sure creation went along the way it's supposed to and all that stuff. We might call them regional supervisors, okay, in that respect. And then you have the archangels, who are sort of the supervisors of the supervisors. They watch what they're doing. But now the lower classes of angels are the ones that are closer to humanity. The higher up the ladder of angels you go to, the Sephrim and all that, the closer they get to the Creator, the more unhuman they become, the more less human-like they are. They're more and more spiritual. They go up on different spiritual levels here. Okay, that's what you're doing. And they all have different jobs and different attributes, and they look differently. I think the Sephrim is like nothing but wings and eyes. It's like
very 4 or 5, four wings or 6 wings or something like that, and they're very elaborate looking. From what I understand, they're also much taller than humans.
Well, and why it's described with so many eyes is because it's sort of the eyes of the creators watching everything, constantly watching. There's that name, the Watchers again, and that's got to be their big spiritual attribute. They're cognizant of everything. Okay, that's how it goes. In other words, like when we were taught, number one rule of law enforcement is observe everything. Okay, keep your eye on everything, watch everything, observe and understand everything as much as possible going on around you. Well, that bleeds over into everything in our lives. Okay, the more observant we are, the better off we'll be in the long run. Well, these guys are super observant. That's their job. They got to see, watch everything. Okay, but the lower rung of the angels, just what we call the angels, the archangels, the guardian angels, are closer to humanity in that respect. And there are several instances in the Bible. I think there's one instance, I can't remember exactly where it was, where somebody said something about praying to the angel, and the angel said, "No, don't pray to me. I'm your fellow servant. I'm with you. I'm just like you in that respect." But although they're not human, they are spiritual beings. Whereas we are human, we are attached more to our physical existence than they are. You understand what I'm saying? Because they don't have the physical existence you and I have. In other words, mankind supposedly was made lower than the angels, but spiritually we are higher than the angels. That sounds weird, and it's kind of hard to grasp theologically wise. But that's the way that works out. And the only reason why we are spiritually higher than the angels is because we have a completely different relationship with God.
Yeah, I think part of the schism which happened in heaven, which made the fallen angels come, is that they felt that they were superior to the human race, and they were jealous, I guess, of our spirituality. But what the angels do not have that we do have is freedom of will. So whereas they're not supposed to do whatever they want. They only can do the will of God. We can do whatever we feel like, regardless of the Creator. So I think that's where the schism in the war in heaven kind of sort of began.
Well, in Arab folklore, with the jinn, that was one of the reasons why the jinn supposedly got thrown out of heaven or were created, because they thought they were better than humans.
Yeah.
In that respect. And I think that was probably one of the things that convinced the rebel angels. Think about this just a moment. This is interesting to think about. A third of the angels from heaven followed Lucifer, whatever his real name is, by the way, followed him out of heaven. Boy, he must have really been a talker to convince these guys and to pull the wool over their eyes, so to speak, and get them to leave with him. He had to be quite a con artist, okay? Definitely. This guy's super good at what he does. No wonder he's called the Angel of Light. He's sort of the illuminated one in that respect. Although he is a dark angel, his true light is a dark light, not a bright light. Okay, put it that way. But in order to talk that many angels who were, as I said, cohesive on these things, they knew everything. They saw the face of God. They understand all this, and yet he taught them out of their position and into following him. That amazes me to this day. But this guy, and here's the interesting thing. This is what God said about Lucifer, whatever his real name is. This is what he said about him. He said, "You are the most beautiful, the most intelligent, the most perfect thing I've ever made. And yet, iniquity is found in you." There's a fall here. Okay. And it's not my fault. That's what God's saying. It's your fault. And why? Because it's pride. Because you're so beautiful, so perfect, so wonderful, you think you should be God. So that's what Lucifer says to God. "I will rise above the heights of the cloud. I will be like the Most High. You, God, will be my footstool." but I will be God. That's pretty. That's pretty prideful. That's pretty
Yeah,
bad. When you
that's
do that to the
basically
person that created you, when you bite the hand that feeds you, that's what happens. Yeah.
And what are some of the other creatures that have come up, or cases or beings that maybe people don't mention as much? Is there any unique ones besides some of the ones that we know of?
Well, like I said, I ran into the vampire one time. That was an interesting encounter.
Was it a
Uh,
parasitical entity, or like actually like a vampire, like Louis Lestat, like Interview with the Vampire? How was that case?
well, it was kind of a really strange the way the thing happened. I was actually in Charleston, South Carolina, and downtown Charleston, you've got several old churches, and I was in one of the churchyards. And I'll tell you what I was there for actually that day. I was kind of looking around for one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence who's supposed to be buried there. And so I was looking around that day, and I did finally find his grave. By the way, had a little small marker on it. I thought it would be something bigger than that for somebody to sign the Declaration of Independence. But anyway, I was looking around the tombstones that day, and it was a dark. It was sort of late in the day. It was a dark, cloudy, overcast day in autumn. I remember that well. And I was looking around. Now, I've always found cemeteries to be very interesting because it's sort of like a history book. The tombstones tell different stories and everything. It's fascinating, especially old graveyards like that. So I was looking around, and all of a sudden, this girl was standing beside me. Very nice looking young lady. She had sort of long, dark brown hair, like she was nice looking, and she kind of had. She was very pale, like though. And all of a sudden, there she was. I just happened to look up. I thought, well, maybe I didn't see her come up. And she said, "Hey, how you doing?" I said, "Okay." She was very friendly, and I shook hands with her. And she said, "My name is," I remember her name was Claire. Okay. It's Claire something. And when I shook her hand, it was like actually shaking the hand of a dead person. I mean, it was cold, and I've touched dead people and I know how they feel. And this is what that felt like. That's what it reminded me. I thought, well, and I didn't think about anything like this, and I think, well, God, maybe she's got, some kind of disease or some kind of a physical problem to have hands that cold because it wasn't that cold of a day. It wasn't a winter day. And another thing, and I thought about it later, it didn't occur to me at the time. You know how you can stand kind of close to somebody, you can get the warmth off of somebody. You know what I'm saying? The body warmth, a little bit of it. And I remember there was nothing there like that. And that's all I'm gonna say about that because I can't say for sure, but I remember that later. But anyway, uh, she said, "You like graveyards?" Or something like that. And I said, "Oh, yeah, I like to look around cemeteries." She said, I like them too. She said, "I live here, actually." I said, "Well, I thought that's sort of, but roundabout way saying you spent a lot of time there." And I said, "Oh, really?" And she said, "Yeah." She said, "Actually, uh, I'm buried here. I'm a vampire." And I said, "What?" Because it kind of took me off guard. And she said, "I'm a vampire." And I said, "Oh, you're like one of these, you're in one of these vampire societies, where they drink each other's blood and they hang out and they have the fake fangs." She said, "Oh, no, no, it's nothing like that. I'm a real vampire. I'm like 200 some odd years old or something like that." And I said, "Well, that's very interesting. And I'm starting to kind of maybe I should distance myself from this person. This is kind of freaky." And so I just kept walking as I was talking to her. We just kept walking, through the cemetery, like, and I said, "Well, I said, if you're really a vampire, what are you doing out in the daytime?" And she said, "Oh, that's just the movies. We can come out in daytime when it's dark and cloudy like this. We just don't get out in the sun." I said, "Oh, well, that's interesting. I never thought about that." And I kind of looked down. I'm looking around some of the tombstones. I look up and she is gone. I mean, and there's no way she could have got away from me without me seeing her. And I think maybe she's hiding behind one of these tombstones. I started looking around, looking behind the tombstone. Where did she go? I mean, it was a wide open graveyard. There was nowhere she could have went without me seeing her. You know what I'm saying? You just don't move that fast. Humanly move that fast and get away from somebody. And I'm looking for her. I mean, she's nowhere around. You know. That's it. That was kind of. I began to wonder maybe if that was the real deal or what, you know. And here's to
There-
cap it all off. I happened to catch a movement in my eye, and I look up, and in the tree, the oak trees, the biggest bat I have ever seen in my life is flying off through the trees. I mean, it was huge bat, and I'm going, oh, nobody's ever gonna believe this, you know. And the next day, I went back to that cemetery, and I was looking around, and I found a grave with that name on it. And it was like about 200 years old or something like that. Now, whether that's coincidence or what, or did I really meet a real vampire? The jury's still out on that. That was freaky, though.
There's something to it. There's something to that energy. I think there's parasitic things that are vampire like. And I know when I went through chemo when I was 17, I read a lot of Anne Rice, those vampire books, and kind of escaped in them a little too much because the cancer had spread from testicle to stomach and lungs. And, I was like basically croaking, except the chemo saved me. And I was reading those Anne Rice books. And then when I came back to school, I was really pale and I wore black. People called me a vampire. I didn't go around saying I was a vampire or anything, but there's something to that energy. I know it. Something. I think it's parasitical, but might have been who I wouldn't rule it out. That's for sure. Someone said God is a man-made concept, and I hear people say that a lot. And I notice on Facebook, if you post anything about God, people just go crazy under it.
Go ballistic on you.
Yeah, I'm like, man, that's just a sign of the times. You're just like fulfilling it. But my point is, when people say it's a man-made concept, well, is the Native American Great Spirit a man-made concept? Are they Looney Tunes too? You're just gonna, call it all BS?
I think I can clarify that a little. I've said it on the show many times that basically the religions on this planet and the gods that are depicted as the chiefs of those systems are man-made systems. They aren't. I mean, they're based on things that our non-technologically advanced people or ancestors saw and they couldn't understand. Call them aliens, if you will. But the concepts of the God in the Bible that can see all, knows everything, but that concept of God is man-made, no question. The religion itself is man-made. The religion does not come from God. These systems with these pantheons were designed by the old people who were in charge, those who were put in rule over the people when the aliens left, to give control over mass amounts of people. Now, is there a great spirit? I believe that there's some kind of intelligence to the universe. Do you want to call it God? That's up to you. I wouldn't call it God. But our concept of God from the Bible is, in my opinion, 100% fiction.
I disagree.
Well, that's one thing I've always said about the government, okay? The governments of the world, not just ours alone. They're always good at weaponizing stuff, okay?
Mm-hmm.
That's the first thing when they see something, they say, well, how can we weaponize that, or how can we politicize that to our advantage, whatever that may be. And I think religion has been used in that concept for many centuries.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, there's a great big difference between religion and God. There's a big difference. Religion is a man-made thing, okay? That to me is the whole ball game in that respect. But it comes down to personal belief too, what you want to believe. But I think there's a big world of difference between man-made religion and the true creator of this universe. Okay, put it that way. If you look at God, God never actually endorsed one single religion, really. Not a real religion, maybe a way of life, maybe a way of belief, but not a true religion that men endorse. You understand what I'm saying? Religion is man's answer to putting God in a box and saying, okay, God, I think you should be in this box, and I'm going to label you that way, and I'll use you when I need you to take you out. Okay. I don't think God likes that. Okay. I don't think God would be very pleased with being used that way, but that's the way, man. And a lot of these other religious beliefs in the world are just trying to get the answers to the things they don't know or understand, and they try to equate it. Just like, well, I've said this about Bigfoot before. I did a show with a good friend of mine the other day on sheep squatch. Okay, talking about weird. Sheep squatch is weird.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's weird.
but and the way we describe it is we have to describe its body as like that of Bigfoot with a sheep head on it. But we're talking about things, we're equating that with animals that we recognize or things that we think about, and we're trying to use that as a description of what we're trying to get you to understand. Okay, and we do that a lot with things. Like I said earlier, that's how we learn. We compare and we look for patterns and we do all these other things. We learn, but we're also constantly trying to, just like with pareidolia. Okay, I talk a lot about that. I've had tons of people come up. Look at this. Look at this dog man out in the bushes. He's manifesting. I said, it looks like a shadow to me. It looks like maybe the shade of the trees or something. You see what you want to see sometimes, when it's really nothing really there at all. You know what I'm saying? And so we should not fool ourselves into believing things that aren't real and aren't there, without a doubt. But we're very attuned to doing that kind of thing. That's just the way mankind is. Okay,
Yeah,
that's the
it's the
way we've
nature of our
always been.
brain.
We see something, we try to understand it, and we try to put it into our own little thing of imagery. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, we try to pigeonhole it, and I agree with you on the pareidolia thing. For those people that don't know what pareidolia
Uh-huh.
is, it's seeing patterns in like a cloud. You see a train going through a tunnel, or Mickey Mouse flying through the clouds. I think one of my friends came up with a great concept the other day. We were playing games last weekend, and the subject of Mothman came up because we talked about it on one of the other shows, and he's not a paranormal guy. He doesn't do research like I do. He's just a regular old guy. And he said that because he camps in West Virginia, where the Mothman was originally discovered, and they have some very, very large moths in that state. And the gypsy moths are one of them, but I don't know what breed it was, but there's a moth that has a wingspan that's fairly wide, probably a couple feet wide. And he thinks maybe some of the Mothman sightings might be someone seeing a pareidolia effect, like this moth stuck on the side of a tree. Maybe it's a dead tree that there's nothing above where the moth is, and the tree and its trunk trying to make the person think that that's the body and arms, and that the head is the moth. That's a possibility that we can have with some of these cryptos, but with Bigfoot, we have too many clear images of the creature, particularly the Patterson Gimlin film. And I've seen him up close. I mean, like within 10 feet. It's an actual living creature. It's not, in my opinion, a paranormal creature. It doesn't walk through, misty portals in the forest, and it doesn't teleport itself up and down the planet to a spaceship. It is, I believe, the closest thing to us on the kingdom of the phylum of our species, and where we say that the chimpanzee is somewhere between 1% and 5% different DNA wise from us. This creature, which I've seen up close, I think is closer to maybe 0.5% or 1% differentiated from our DNA. That's how human-like the face is on these creatures.
Well, the experience I had, the Bigfoot I saw, it was unmistakable. I said, I have a problem when you show me a picture and you guys draw a red circle around it. You show me what I look at. I mean, I want to see it plainly for what it truly is. I don't want to fool myself. I don't want to fool you. I want to be truthful about any of this at all times. That's the main focus of all paranormal investigation and research, is the truth, the real truth. You know what I'm saying? Of the matter. And I've told a lot of people this: do not preposition yourself into believing something before you actually experience it. Don't precondition yourself to believe something that may not be there. Okay. But when I saw Bigfoot, it was unmistakable. I could have reached out and hit him with my hand. I mean, that was that close to him. And I mean, I saw what I saw. I can't unsee it. I
Yeah.
know what it was. And it was just gone that very quickly, though. And it was almost gone supernaturally, almost. I have to say that because it went behind a big tree. Okay, right in front of me. I was looking at it with a night scope. I mean, I could see it plainly for what it was. And it just stepped behind this big oak tree, and I went to it. I didn't run from it. I went to it. I ran to it like all police officers do. You have to run to the gunfire. You don't run from it.
Right.
I ran the mute. I ran. I want to see, get a closer look at this guy, and it was just gone. There was nowhere he could have went. I looked down through the forest. There were no bushes moving. I looked up in the tree. He wasn't up in the tree. There was no hole in the ground. Where the heck did this guy go that quick? That was the big mystery to me to this day. And
Yeah.
the only way I could actually explain that is somehow or another, some kind of portal-like activity or some kind of camouflaging itself or cloaking or what. It's got to be something like that. There's
May
no
have
way
hidden.
possibly that thing could have got away that quick. You know what I'm saying?
Well, they are extremely fast, faster than people give them credit for. Most cryptozoologist researchers credit them as being somewhere between 10 and 15 feet tall and 500-600 pounds each individual. I disagree with that assessment 100%. The situation where I saw Bigfoot, we were on the second floor of my cousin's house. Second floor, 12, 15 feet up in the air. And the wind, it was fall or early winter, just after or just before Thanksgiving weekend. And we were playing in the room, and I smelled this horrible, horrible smell, something on the order of a mix of feces, skunk, and the great outdoors, and maybe a little bit of urine. And I thought to myself, because there was just us kids in this room, and two of the kids had diapers. And
I hear
said to
that a
my
lot.
cousin,
You smell him before you ever see him.
I smelt him before I saw him. Exactly right. And I said to my cousin Mike, I said, "Hey, Mike, one of the babies has a dirty diaper. Let's take them down to the babysitter so that they can change the diaper." And at that second, I looked in the window and I saw this very, very human face, long brown hair with patches of blonde, white, and reddish auburn brown hair, and maybe some black. Most of the face was naked. There was wrinkles in the face, so it was an older individual. It had a very long mustache and a very distinguished beard, but all around here was all skin. Everyone thinks they're fully covered. They're not. Their face is not covered with hair. The rest of the body is. And the face had a happy, pleasant face on it while he was watching us play. But when he looked over to see me in the corner of the room looking at him, as soon as our eyes met, his face went from joy to absolute anger. That he was angry that he got caught being seen by us. And he looked in my eyes and screamed at me. We all shuddered and ran out of the room downstairs to the babysitter for safety. And when we got down to that room, there was a window looking out where he was standing. They had it was a play cabin modeled after President Lincoln's birthplace, just a little crappy pine playhouse. He was standing on top of it. And this was made out of just plain. I had the same exact house at my house in Maryland. My cousins had this house in their house backyard in Ohio. And he was standing on that. And then he leaned over at least 10 feet because the house was probably 10 foot away from the playhouse. But he leaned over onto the siding, and you could see huge muddy handprints on either side of the window that he was looking through to watch us. And when we got down to the where the babysitter was, we saw him jump off of the playhouse into a sand pit, and literally 2 steps, and he was in the next backyard. Gone. I mean, gone like a flash. And we followed him the next day, that very morning. And right after he left, my parents and my aunt and uncle came home, and we told them about it. Like, oh, you guys have had too much sugar, watching too much TV, blah, blah. They blew us off. The next morning, my cousins and I, we went out and we investigated. We saw the handprints on the window. We saw on the top of the roof where several slats had been broken from where he was standing. If this creature, and he had to have been at least 10 feet, probably more like 12. If he was 500 pounds, he would have crushed that little pine box house, would have destroyed it. So I'm thinking he's probably closer to around 300 pounds max.
Yeah.
But we followed the footprints, and the way he was running, they were probably a good 5-foot wingspan from foot to foot. Very, very long stride. We followed the footprints through 3 backyards, and then we followed him into the woods where he turned right, and then he got to a creek. We searched on the other side of the creek. We searched up the creek. We searched down the creek on both sides. Like me and my cousin, we spanned on both, walking like a team on both sides of the creek, up and down, looking for this footprints. This creature intelligently used the creek to hide its footprints. So it uses evasion tactics. They absolutely use evasion tactics to get away from us. So your Bigfoot may have gone through the portal. There is an alien race that allegedly looks like Bigfoot that can use that kind of technology. But if you saw an earthly Bigfoot, he either camouflaged himself in a tree, they can be very, very quiet, but they smell. If he could still smell them nearby, he was hiding from you.
There's been some crazy.
The Bigfoot I saw, when I saw him, he just kind of like what you said. Our eyes kind of met. You know what I'm saying? He looked at me and I looked at him, and that's when he just kind of stepped behind that tree. You know, and I could see. I saw the hair, like you said, it's very much like your description of that. And the lady, the sort of the brown hair, and I remember it was hanging a little bit off of his arm. You know, it was long.
It's long hair.
Yeah. It blows your mind when you see something like that. You know, that close up.
Your flight responses kick in.
There's been some wild things with David Paulides and Missing 411 UFO connection, and he had another one. The documentary has like 3, but there was Bruce Maccabee and his wife. Some school had a UFO sighting over it, and in the tree they actually got a photograph of something that may have been Bigfoot, but it was kind of like had the Predator thing going. You know, the Predator from the movie, the weird whatever chameleon-like thing. Device. Yeah. And there's also Ron Moorhead, who I've been talking to in email lately, who had quantum Bigfoot that basically gets in quantum physics pretty heavily. And he has a new book coming out with David writing the foreword to it. That's pretty fascinating. And definitely some weird things with it that are hard to figure out, you know, with the cloaking stuff and things like that. And of course, there's been some stories from Small Town Monsters, always Chestnut Ridge, where there was these crazy, that's a real story. If you look it up, Chestnut Ridge, God, I forget which state, but there's a whole documentary about it from Small Town Monsters, where the military came out, UFOs, white Bigfoot, firing at white Bigfoot from a farmer, just complete mania in this town. And if we have some Small Town Monsters guests coming up on Dogman, and basically Small Town Monsters makes documentaries and books about these towns that have had crazy things happen, like Willow Creek. I forget, there's in the Carolinas, there's that weird lizard man case. You know, these weird towns where now it's like, we got a parade, you can get the 2-for-1 lizard man special, big hamburger, and they get into the stories and stuff like that. And I think there's some truth to it and things like that. But one thing I want to say, I've had Neil Donald Walsh conversations with God on, and I have problems with religion like anyone else. I mean, we've had people abused in our family from a preacher who was a part of our family. He's dead now, thank God. But there's things like that that just, you know, disgust you towards it. But one of the things God first told Neil Donald Walsh was, you got me all wrong. And that religion is man's era in trying to understand God, not to throw it all out. I would just say, don't throw God out like the baby in the bathwater scenario just because of man being a dickhead. You know, that's why I go back to Native American shamanic, the Great Spirit. You know, there's definitely something there with that. So you can call it Great Spirit or God or whatever. Or Frank, call it like Wayne Dyer said, call it Frank if you want.
I've had people say that to me. Say, how can you worship a God that killed so many people in the Crusades and all that? So, whoa, wait a minute. God didn't do that. That was man.
That was us.
That was a God.
Using
He
God as
probably
their
does
That
not.
was us.
excuse.
He
Yeah, he
was doing
probably
it in the
doesn't want his
name of
name
God,
used
but
like
not
that.
under his
Definitely.
orders. Yeah.
That's what
Yeah.
God says to Neil Donald Walsh. I didn't tell those people that that's man using me as a way to
Well,
enact the
here's what I always say about that. Okay. You always say, "Oh, well, God's on our side." No, 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 no. That's where you run into trouble. See, you should say you're on God's side. Not He's not on your side. You should be on His side. That's the way that goes. Okay. But we've always got that wrong. God's on our side. We're in the right. We're the good guys. Okay. That's where we run into trouble. Definitely. And I don't think God appreciates being hijacked like that. Definitely. If I were God, I wouldn't like it.
Well, I mean, he's also commercialized in so many different ways. You got how many of these different televangelist gentlemen on TV, and I recently saw one of my friends on Facebook was writing about some of the recent flooding in down in Texas, and this gentleman that has, I think he just has one store. He has a mattress and a bedding store, and people had been displaced due to the flooding. So he said, "Come over to my store, sleep on my beds, and I will find a way to cook food for you people." At the same time, they asked Joel Osteen, one of these giant televangelist fellas. He's got a mansion and a yacht and a jet plane and this huge religious complex that could have housed a lot of people. And they said, "Would you let these people stay?" And he said, "No, we just had the rugs cleaned." What? You have a church to help people, and these people needed your help, and you say no? I would take that man's license away, and that's just uncool. I don't care how recently you had the rugs cleaned. You have a lot of money. You can do it again. Wait till these people leave and do it again. That's the kind of stuff you see a lot in religion.
Those people are
pure.
sick.
Ugh.
It's
That's
just
disgusting.
abuse. It's abuse.
Yeah,
That's what my grandfather.
It's physical abuse.
My grandfather used to tell me many years ago. And when you're young, you never really appreciate the wisdom of your elders. Okay.
Yes, that's
but
very
my
true.
grandfather told me many years ago, always be very, very, very suspicious of anything having to do with money. That includes the people connected with it. Okay. You follow the money trail, you know what I'm talking about.
Oh yes.
But here's the thing about it. When I think about these so-called televangelists and all their yachts and all this stuff, I remember who threw the money changers out of the temple. Okay,
That was
because they
Jesus.
weren't, they were. That's who they are. Okay, in my book, and they got thrown out. There you go. But they make a big business out of something spiritual. That's one thing. That's one thing. I've had people come up and say, "Well, you helped us with this demon problem. How much do we owe you?" And I say, "How can I charge you for something like that? This is a spiritual thing. I never charge money for that. That's ridiculous. I'm not in this for the money on that thing. You know what I'm saying? That's not, if I was in this for the money, boy, am I in the wrong place.
Yeah.
Definitely. But I said, I can't charge you for that. I said, what you got? 7 demons, and I'll give you a discount on $29.95 on each one. I can't do that. This is
like
a spiritual thing, you know.
Yeah, like the scene in Ghostbusters
Yeah.
when they capture the first ghost in the hotel and they come out and they're like, "Oh, that'll be $5,000," and the guy says, "Well, that's outrageous. I won't pay." It's like, "Oh, well, we'll just go ahead and put this right back in there." But as they're telling the guy the price, they're like, "Well, it's $4,000 for capturing the beast. It's going to be $500 for us to take it to our facility and store it, and then we'll give you the first user discount. So it's $4,000." And the guys don't want to pay. And they're like, "Oh, we'll just put the ghost back." He's like, "No, it's okay. I'll pay." It's like, "Yeah, I understand it. Yeah,
that's like that too." That's like that joke. If you don't pay the exorcist, do you get repossessed?
Yeah, right.
Okay. There you go.
If you didn't donate to his church enough, it's only good for a week. Then he comes back and gets you.
Yeah. But that's what I said years ago when I got into that. I said, you got to draw the line at helping people or having a. You can enjoy what you do. There's nothing wrong with that. You know what I'm saying? You can enjoy what you do and take pleasure in it. Nothing wrong with that. But if that's all you're in it for, you know what I mean? That's not good. That's not good.
And the way I see it, the service, the type of service you're doing. I mean, how can you charge? How many demons do you? How much do you charge per demon you get out of a house or per poltergeist? You know, and if I were into that kind of business like you are, you know, I'd be like, you don't owe me anything, but when's dinner? If you're making hamburgers, I'll have a hamburger with you. Make me a meal. That to me, that's a better payment. You know, you do a solid for somebody, and they make you a nice, tasty meal. Someone does a solid for you. And like when your friends come to help you move, what do? You buy pizza and beer. So after you got everything in the house, you have pizza and beer, and you relax, right? That's an awesome form of payment right there.
Well, yeah, I had that happen. As a matter of fact, I had a lady that helped a lady out and her family and all that. And she invited me for a spaghetti dinner. I said, sure. I said, sure, I'm hungry. This will make you hungry doing stuff like that. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
But, you know, to me, though, I've had a lot of people say, you know, and it's very rewarding when they tell you in the end, oh, thank God that you come as you showed up. And thank God you're here to help me. At least what a little bit I can do. It is very rewarding, you know. Although in certain situations like that, I don't take the credit for it. It's not really me. I consider, you know, working with God. I don't take credit for it. God does it. It's not me. Okay, I'm sort of the vessel in that respect. I don't take credit for it. That's not me. I'm not doing that in that respect. That's how you get rid of these things. It's the power of, in my book, the power of God does that. I don't. I've often said if you've had a true cleansing, it's almost like somebody's opened all the windows and the door in the house and it's clean wind has blown through. You know, you get that feeling, that spiritual feeling off of that's taken place. You know that something special has happened there. You know what I mean?
And I was just going to say, Dennis, what's some of the UFO stuff that's come up? And when you were in law enforcement, was there any other thing that came up besides Bigfoot with weirdness?
Yeah, I had a experience. I wasn't in law enforcement at the time. I was downtown, and I had a little place downtown. I would go walk every day towards the evening, and I had it plotted out. I think it was like a 2 mile walk I would do. And I came back to my truck. Well, that day it was sort of a low overcast day. It was on Sunday. I remember well. This has been about maybe 10 years ago, and and I'm gonna tell you this. Like I said, I've been in this 55 plus years now, and I've studied UFOlogy from the beginning too. UFOs have always been fascinating me. I've seen some other things in the sky that are unexplainable, but I've always thought. Here's my regular attitude. I want to say this before I get into my story. I always thought that what people were seeing, 90% of it was probably misidentified. You know what I'm saying? That's what I always felt. And then it was the other 10% I really wasn't sure about. You know, that was my attitude toward it. But until you actually have an experience like this, that's when you really turn a corner in your thinking. You know, and that's what happened to me that day. And I had been walking out. I'd been watching the sky because it was very overcast. You know, low hanging clouds rain on you eventually. That's the way it works. And I've been watching. You know, I said they won't get caught and soaked in the middle of my walk here. You know. So I made it back to my truck, and I was just standing there on the sidewalk. I could show you right now exactly where this took place. It's still there. And I was kind of on the sidewalk, and I was next to a building, looking back over the horizon, like. And I was just standing there cooling off, you know. And like I say, they're very low-hanging clouds. And as I'm looking towards the horizon, I wasn't thinking about anything like this, you know. I mean, it was just not, it blew my mind this would happen. But as I'm looking back towards the horizon, through the clouds, I see something coming in and out of the clouds. Just like that, you know. And I could say, what is that? You know, and I couldn't hear anything. There was no noise. And I was uptown, but it's a small town, and it was a Sunday afternoon. There was no traffic. Okay. No traffic at all. It was quiet as a proverbial church kind of thing. And I was standing watching this. And I said, "What is that?" And I thought, when I first thought, it was like maybe it was a small Cessna or something coming in and out of the clouds like that, and it was coming towards me, but at a little bit of an angle. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't coming straight. It was sort of like an angle. And I said, "Well, what the heck is that?" And it was dark. It was black, and it was huge. The closer it got to me, the bigger it was, and it was football field size, huge. Okay, when it got over to me, and like I say, I couldn't see the whole thing completely because like it's in the clouds, coming in and out of the clouds, or the clouds are moving against it or whatever. But I can see the bottom of it, and it's triangular shape. Okay, huge triangular like shape, and there were things on each end, or each corner of the point of it. But I couldn't tell you, there weren't lights. They weren't on, okay? They didn't have any lights on it. And like I say, it's a kind of a dark, overcast day. Very low clouds. But it's in and out, and I can see, and at the very bottom is a square, like a ramp. But it's like a door or something. I don't know. It's the only way I could describe it that way. But it's not open or anything, okay? The thing is black metallic. And it was a weird metallic. It wasn't shiny. It
Yeah.
was dark metallic, and it had a very faint purplish glow to it. And I'm standing there watching this thing go over my head. I mean, at a tremendous rate of speed. I've seen blue angels go over me. Okay, I've had jets go over me. They didn't do this. Okay, I mean, it was just that quickly. I can hardly watch it. That quickly over me, that fast, that big, and completely eerily silent.
Mm-hmm.
Everything I have ever seen fly, even gliders, make a noise. This thing was completely silent. And I'm sitting there looking, my mouth dropped open like it. And I got a phone in my pocket. Not one time did I think about trying to get a picture of this thing, because it was that quick and so unexpected. That's what I say about the paranormal. That's the one thing you can always expect. It's going to do the unexpected. And that's what happened to me that day. And this thing, I'm watching this thing, and it goes completely over me into the horizon and gone that quickly. Just as quickly as it told me that it took for me to tell you that. That's how quick it was gone. Okay. And I'm going, and the first thing is, did I see that? And the other thing is, nobody's ever going to believe this. This is wild. But I could see, I saw what I saw. I left there that day. I went and talked to my uncle about it. I went to see my uncle. I told him, he said, and this is what he said about it. So I don't know what you saw, but I know you saw something. I've never seen you like this before. I know you saw something. You experienced something. So here's the weird part. That day, that evening, that night, I actually did a little report on it and sent it to MUFON over the computer. Okay. I found out later, a couple of years later, they never got that. They never got that report. Okay, but I made a little report out of it because I've investigated all these years. I know how you try to observe things and you put down everything. I did a little report on it. It might have been a couple of hundred words, something like that. I sent a report. I've never heard from them. Okay, but that day, unto this day, I've had weird stuff happen because of that. It was almost like living the Mothman prophecies. Okay, remember that movie? I was almost living that. I had my mail tampered with. Had some of the weirdest phone calls I've ever had. And I mean, it sounded robotic. It didn't even sound human at all. I had people get in my yard. I had people mess with my stuff in my yard. I had my lights flicker on and off. I had black government cars circling my house. And I know they were government because I see the plates on them, okay?
Mm-hmm.
There were black SUVs that would circle my house, follow me wherever I went. I remember one time right after this happened, I was coming out, I think it was Kmart or someplace, and there they sat out in the middle of the parking lot. And I started to go out there. The guy I am, I was going to go out there and confront them. Hey, what are you harassing me for? And by the time before I could get there, they drove off. Okay.
Yeah.
But this happened on a regular basis. I had black helicopters come over my house. Black unmarked helicopters. Okay. I've had drones show up, and it'll die down for a while. Sometimes it'll die down, and then it'll come back up again. Matter of fact, I said this when I was writing my last book, The Road Unseen, I was telling you about. That's what I wrote about at the very end of the book. I had this happen, and now since I'm finishing this book, it started up again. It's almost as if they're saying a little message to me. Hey, we know you're there. We know what you're up to, and we want you to know we're here too. Kind of thing. We're watching you or something like that. It's almost a harassment, like in that respect. And I'm not imagining this. I mean, this is real. I've had other people see it with me. I had a friend of mine who was helping me work on that book. It happened to him. They followed him home. So it's, that's the price you pay when you get into UFOlogy stuff. You get some weird, freaky stuff. I've actually had an encounter with the Men in Black, and it almost killed me. I almost died because of it.
I have been harassed by phone by probably, I'm guessing, NSA agent. This was years ago. I was in college. It was a Thursday or Friday night. My school only had classes Monday through Thursday, so all of us kids, we had 4-day weekend. We had Friday or 3-day weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, to just go hog wild. So some friends and I, we always went to the same bar until closing, and it's very, very loud. It's very, very crowded, very small dive bar, and just a couple of us, 2 or 3 of us, started talking about UFOs. And I knew more about what my friends did, so I was basically educating them on the subject. And I mean, we hit just about every gamut of the subject. And then bar closed 3 o'clock, and I drove home. 30-minute drive to my house. And when I get home, the phone's ringing, and there's a guy on the phone. I figured it was one of my friends saying, "Hey, come on over. We got some beer. Let's keep going." This was this guy, and then the ID phone caller ID said something Chicago, somewhere in Chicago. And he started talking to me about, well, why were you talking about UFOs? And I'm like, I'm sure this is one of my friends drawing a prank. I'm like, you were there. Why don't you, don't you remember? He's like, no, you got to stop talking about this. I'm like, what are you talking about? And he started threatening me, and he threatened my life with words that you knew he meant to kill you. But if they were to take him to court and have that transcript, it doesn't sound like he's trying to, kill you. And he called.
Well, I had my friend Nick Redfern wrote a book about UFOlogy, about the mysterious deaths of a lot of people involved in it. You would not believe how many deaths have occurred with people that have researched this. It's scary.
It is. Well, mine gets even worse. It gets even scarier. So he called several times throughout the night. This is like 3:30 in the morning, and I'm getting scared. So I called the police. I said, "Hey, there's this guy that's calling my phone every couple of times, and he's vaguely threatening my life. And, the caller ID says it's in Chicago. I don't know if you guys can help, and I didn't call the emergency line. I called the regular non-emergency line. And they said, well, we'll send an officer right over. The county sheriff came about 20 minutes later, and I was talking to him on my front porch, giving him a description of the phone calls. And I showed him the phone ID on the phone. And then he calls again. And I'm like, oh, this is him. And the officer's like, well, pick it up. I'm like, I don't want to talk to this guy. He's like, no, pick it up. I'm like, okay. So I pick it up, and he's like, so you called the cops on me. And I'm like, how does this guy know I called the police on him? He's in Chicago, for Christ's sake. And I'm like, yeah, you're threatening my life. And I got scared. I called the police. What would you do? And he starts threatening the policeman's life in the phone. I'm like, really? You're going to kill this policeman? And the cop's like, oh, give me the phone. Give me the phone. I'm like, you go. And he talks to the policeman. The policeman was really cool. And he started threatening the policeman's life. And then the policeman hung up, and he's like, yeah, that's messed up. Nothing else ever happened after that. The policeman went home. I went to bed, scared to death, by the way. But how in the hell did my friends do pranks, but they would never.
That's wild. That's wild.
Yeah, that's and too elaborate of a prank for my idiot friends. Sorry, guys.
Hey, I got a question.
I kind of agree with John Keel. John Keel said that they were downright demonic. I have to wonder about that. Definitely.
Hey, Dennis, I got a question from Christina Giordano. You got any Cherokee or Irish? Do you feel like DNA might have anything with it? I know I have those. I know there's certain DNA genetics where we attract, maybe can see things more.
Mhm.
But what is some of your DNA? You think that plays prevalent in it at all?
I think certain peoples, like the Irish, Native Americans, and all that, are closer to the land. They're more spiritual, more open than other,
They're
types of
more
people.
connected. Yeah.
I think it can be not only racial though. I don't think it goes across racial lines. I think it just depends on the individual a lot of times too. But yeah, I think certain families it may be inherited in our DNA that we are more open spiritually to these things, closer to the land. I'm gonna tell you this: I've had a lot of women, who have the women's intuition thing going on, and that's just, I tell them, I say, you're a woman. That's the way you're made. That's the way nature puts you together. You have that intuition. You have that in place because it was part of your makeup. And a lot of people are very susceptible to these things, and they're very sensitive to them. And I've had a lot of people complain about that, Jeffrey. They say, "Oh, why do I have to be so sensitive to it?" And I said, "Well, that's just the way you are. You got to learn to live with that, and you got to learn to deal with it, that sensitivity." And some of us are more sensitive. And I think some of us, and that's what I said earlier in the show about trying to suppress that spiritual part of that unseen part of our world around us. If you kind of suppress that spiritual, the sensitivity to spiritual things, it's not good because you're suppressing a part of yourself.
Yeah.
It's like we've always said, it's not good to hold your emotions in too much. You begin, people get ulcers like that. Look how it affects you physically, what it may be doing to you mentally. Definitely. So we
Yeah.
should try to deal with our sensitivity, be more attuned to it. It's like I've told this to people. We used to have this problem when I was a police officer. You go to somebody's house and you knock on the door. The dog inside starts barking, bark, 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 bark. Finally, you get the people to the door, and so I didn't know anybody was out here. And I said, "Well, what do you think your dog was barking for? Pay attention to your dog.
Yeah.
Trying to tell you something, okay?" Uh, People are so insensitive to this, okay, and they don't need to be that way. But if you are very sensitive, these things, it may seem like they're harassing you sometimes, but
Well,
you
We
need to
yeah.
some
learn
people have
how to
said,
cope with that sensitivity, deal with that sensitivity. If you've got that built into you, that's part of you. Embrace it. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? You
and
need
We
to
had the
embrace it.
dog. We had the dog freaking out right at the beginning of this show, and I think she did it last week, but there was no reason for it. It was kind of creepy. And I said a prayer, and it seemed to calm down. She seems okay now, but she was breathing heavy and trying to break out of the area, and it was just really weird because there was no reason for it, and it seemed kind of creepy for sure. But hey, it's been a great show. We really appreciate it, Dennis, Carroll, and. That's Hunting the Shadows podcast on the YouTube channel. Is there any other links you would like to give out, or we got about 3 minutes?
This has always been some of my favorite subjects. I enjoy talking about them.
Definitely.
My YouTube channel is called Hunting the Shadows. And it's on this. That's the actual name of the YouTube channel, Hunting the Shadows. That's the name of the podcast too. And it's on every Wednesday night at 9 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And my books are available on Barnes and Noble and Amazon. Just look Dennis W. Carroll. Put books in that, and you'll find them. And also, you can, if anybody out there needs to contact me or want to talk to me about anything or whatever, you can reach me at denniswcarroll.com or watch me on the podcast, subscribe, share my podcast out, and check me on there. I have a lot of connections with my books and stuff on there. So that's one way you can get in touch with me that way.
Well, great show. Everybody, you're listening tonight at Public Radio 107.7 FM New Orleans. Next Friday is a friend and person I've wrote books with, Andrew Colvin, the Mothman photographer. And he had me title the show The Secret of Mothman Revealed. And he actually got a picture of it standing in his window on a Polaroid. And it's crazy. Like it has this big insect head and you could see it behind him, and it was just a picture taken of him, and you could see it in the window, and it's one of the best pictures I've ever seen. It's really creepy. And he don't really like Mothman to be called evil a lot, and gets into Garuda and some ancient cultures and things like that, and the Thunderbird, and there's weird things about the Thunderbird with native lore going after the horned serpents and the Garuda and stuff like that. So it's definitely going to be a good show. So stay tuned. We got some great ones coming up. And we appreciate everybody listening. Remember, we got a Church of Mabus radio show group on Facebook, and you should join it. So for some reason, it won't let me invite anybody to it lately. You just got to try to join it, I guess. I don't know. Facebook's such a crapper. But anyway, thanks everybody for listening. We appreciate it, Dennis. Appreciate it, Jay. And thanks everybody out there. Have a great weekend. Good night, everybody. Take care.
All right, everyone.